Call to order this pre-agenda meeting for the Siloam Springs Board of Directors, December 13, 2023. Roll call.
Blair. Smiley.
Here.
Wiles.
Here.
Hunt.
Here.
Rissler. Allen. Carroll.
Here.
Thank you, Renee. We do have a quorum, so we will continue on with our pre-agenda meeting. And at this time, I will turn this over to our administrator, Alan Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, board members. Had a couple board members late. Things came up and couldn't make it, but as we have a quorum, we will continue to move forward with the mayor's approval. Pre-agenda for December 13th, the consent agenda. If we would take a few moments, look through A through G to see if anything's on there that you would like to discuss. Staff will be here available for questions. If everybody's had time to look through that, is there anything that you'd like to discuss on the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd just like to hear about item D. I don't have any specific questions. I'd just like to see if that could be laid out for us.
Okay, Steve will be happy to come up and answer your questions.
Steve Gorzak, Public Works Director. I had to look and see what D was. That's me. What in particular? I mean, this is approval for construction of the sewer line.
Is it construction as well as reconstruction, or I'd just like to hear about the project a little
Okay.
bit.
Along with that memo, there was a picture of the route that the line's going to run.
Yeah, I saw
And
the line.
And it's going to run, basically we're going to dig up Maxwell and put the line in Maxwell Street, run it right next to the existing line
Okay.
from Flint Place all the way down to Maine. And then we'll connect a couple houses over just north of Jefferson on the corner there. There's an 8-inch line dedicated just to those two houses, so that line will go away and we'll bring the line from the house to the new line. And the line going under the pedestrian bridge in the park will be abandoned. We probably won't take it down at this time. We'll leave it there, but it'll be empty. And then when it's all said and done, then the street will be milled and overlaid, and any curb that needs repaired will be repaired. So it'll basically be a brand new street when it's all done, and a new 18-inch sewer line running under the street.
Okay, so it's new stuff, but it's also going to replace other things that we've been looking to.
Yeah, and the reason we're going from, fortunately, the initial design was just to go from Jefferson to Maine because the engineer's estimate was 1.1 million, but instead we were able to go to Flint Place for $1,021,000 and change. And the nice part about that is Flint Place, there's two sewer lines that run down Maxwell, and they both go. One of them stops at Flint Place and goes into the 15-inch line. And I wanted to try to be able to do the design from there down to Maine, because if we ever do a next phase of that sewer line project, then we'll head south, and there's a 6-inch line that just parallels the 15, and we would get rid of the 6-inch and bring the houses over to the new line, and then everything's just going to one line rather than jumping around. So
Thank you. I looked it over and what have you, but it was not making all the sense I was needing. But so we're doing something new, but we're cleaning other things up, and,
Right.
and that's a good thing.
Right.
Thank you.
mm-hmm.
I guess I kind of have a question about it, and this is from a very non-construction minded person. We've talked about the issues with the wall over on Maxwell Street. With all the construction on the road, is that going to impact any of the other issues that we're already having?
No, the new sewer line will be to the,
It'll be on the west
E-
side?
I think it's gonna be east of the existing line.
Oh, okay, okay.
And the only thing that would impact the wall potentially would be to vibrate when they put the bedding in and then cover the line up with gravel, then they would compact it and vibrate it. But the vibration is not gonna radiate out far enough to be able to affect that wall.
Okay, and that was kind of what I was thinking, because that wall's kind of unstable now, right?
Yeah.
So I just didn't know if there was a way to sort of work on both of them at the same time.
That question was brought up because that stretch of line, after it finally gets down the hill, it flattens out. And because it flattens out, the pipe material has to change. It has to go from PVC to ductile iron. And it has to go to ductile iron because it's going to be so shallow under the street that we didn't want to take a chance on vehicles crushing the PVC line. Because, I mean, it's going to only be less than a foot, maybe a foot. So we had to change construction material, pipe material, to ductile iron. But anyway,
And
still,
that's kind of what I was getting at is, I mean, would there be a reason to sort of combine the projects, especially if your project impacts the existing?
if the vibration causes problems with the
Oh.
wall, well, and if it causes problems with the wall, we'll probably have a change order. So,
Yeah. Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
welcome.
Any other questions, anything on the consent agenda? If not, moving on to contracts and approvals. H, approval of GRDA financing, AMI meters purchasing at $862,661.56.
Alan, I think on our regular agenda that was pulled. Have we added that back?
We did. I made a note that I didn't even look at myself. Thank you, Mayor. That is being, the reason I'm pulling that, board, just to let you know, I got the attorney review back to submit to the attorney, and I didn't get it in time, enough time for them to review, so I'm going to pull it until next meeting. Thank you for catching that, Mayor. That's my mistake. All right. Letter I, approval of Copperleaf Drive reduction of master street plan right-of-way needs. Questions? Moving on to J, approval real estate purchase agreement, Simon Sager Avenue, Stubbs Street for $350,000. That's a part of the money that you've approved to build a sub-street and the purchase of the land. Any questions there? Moving on to ordinances. Letter K, ordinance 23-32, second reading, amending City Code Section 7030, discharge of firearms or weapons. Not any questions. Moving on to L, ordinance 23-33, second reading, amending City and Municipal Code, Chapter 54, Land Use Code, significant development definition. No questions. We'll move on to M, ordinance 23-34, second reading, vacation of utility easement and alleyway of 800 block of East Jefferson Street. Any questions there? And that's pretty much our agenda for the December 19th. Just again, and I'll try to remind everyone as we go through the meeting today that the December 19th meeting will be at the library. We'll be doing some renovation to the sound system starting the next couple days, and that will go into around Christmas time. So once we get through the 19th meeting, we'll be back as business as usual in the room. But I'll put a couple of reminders out, and we'll make sure we get it out on social media. We've been doing it for a couple weeks. Before we get into the discussion topic, board, what I did, I sent you kind of an outline about board goals. We have some board members out today. What I want to do is what I did in 22, the board members that were on the board at that time, I gave you copies of the board of the goals that you submitted. For my count, I think we submitted as a board 49 goals out of those goals, 11 were approved to move forward. So again, later in January, I'm hoping to come back and just, once you wrap your head around everything, any new goals, what we would want to do with the current goals, I will give you the status of what we've done with the goals that were submitted. And again, staff just needs direction as we move forward, what we want to do with those goals moving forward. So again, and I have other information that I can give you if you need anything else that I didn't provide today. Okay. So moving on to the, our discussion day is about the Recreation Center. I know a few weeks ago, or 2 to 3 weeks ago, we had talked about the Park and Rec Center. That was a board goal. So we went back and we worked diligently and worked as a staff to try to cut down cost. So Travis and Jason are here today to kind of tell you where we're at, also in the room of the architect firm, to be able to answer any questions if you have them. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jason and Travis.
Jason Davis, Public Service Director. I want to start off by saying I am one that is not completely for feasibility studies and things of that nature. After looking at what was laid out and what we need to do to move forward with this rec center, I feel that the firm that Travis has been working with really laid it out the best way possible.
Jason, if I could, if you will speak into the mic
Yeah,
because
sorry.
of the recording.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
So we've been working at it. Alan asked us to go back and look and cut as much as we could, and we have there. I feel like we've cut everything that we could cut and still be able to maximize what we need to do to move forward with a rec center. I think we've got some options for you and what we've shaved out, and want to see if that works for you. I've spent a lot of time looking at this and what was brought to me, and I know Alan has as well. I personally feel like it's the right move, and I hope you guys really look at what this actually offers for the city of Siloam. Travis has got a few things that he's going to go over with you, and I'll turn it over to him. If you got any questions for me, please let me know.
Thanks, Jason. My apologies. Good afternoon, Board. Madam Mayor, Travis Cheney, Parks and Recreation Manager. Pull up a presentation here. As Alan and Jason have mentioned, at the November 29th pre-agenda meeting, the board had the opportunity to ask some questions about this proposed feasibility study for the Recreation Center. I know there were some concerns about scope and cost. Staff was able to answer some of those questions, but in that format, weren't able to give a full presentation. So we've got the architecture firm with us today to give y'all a really good sense of what a feasibility study means in this context, what that would look like. They'll be using a case study from a similar size community that they've completed up in Missouri, and kind of walk you through what would this process look like, why it's important. What I'd like to do first is give y'all, again, just a little bit of context of what staff's been working on, how we've gotten to this point, and why it's staff's recommendation that we proceed. And at the very end, we'll kind of break out the project scope and fee and lay out 3 different options of scoping and fee. And hopefully, by the time we've explained what each task accomplishes, you'll have a better sense of, whether you want to pull certain items or leave certain items as they are, but you'll at least have all the information to understand how each component fits into the overall project. And again, all of this goes back to, one, conversations that I think the city's been having for going on 10 years now about a desire for some sort of recreation center. It's probably been happening for longer than that. But, of course, in 2022, the city went through a long community engagement process, developed the 2040 comprehensive plan There were three particular goals that came out of that plan related to parks and recreation. In brief, they were develop a master plan, make sure that our existing facilities are well maintained, and potentially build a rec center. Those were the three big kind of parks related goals. The board kind of keyed in on this last goal, and I'm going to read it verbatim. Plan for sports facilities for youth and active adults, either within a parks master plan or as an interim measure. The community consistently expressed a desire for amenities such as pickleball courts, new and improved ball fields, an indoor recreation or community center similar to the Jones Center in Springdale, and expanded parking and facilities at the James Butts Baseball Complex. Coordinate with the school district and JBU to evaluate needs, resources, and additional partnership opportunities. And so shortly after the board adopted this comprehensive plan, the board set 2023-2024 board goals. One of those related to parks was develop a plan for a citywide community and recreation center. And the goal that the board set for staff was to have this presented to the board by the end of 2024, third quarter of 2024. And so staff's been working in 2023 to set the wheels in motion to meet that 2024 goal for having a rec center plan. And the three things that the board had asked for that we bring to you are community input regarding recreational needs, consult with an architect or engineer to develop a conceptual plan, and then develop a funding plan. So those are the three things that we're trying to have done by the third quarter of 2024. And again, this is the proposed site that the board has asked staff to look at for a recreation center. It's just immediately north of the regional hospital. It's close to the high school. You can see the golf course off there to the west, Sager Creek Soccer Complex. This is currently sort of the extreme east end of town, but as many people know, that's the direction development is trending right now. And as you see here, again, it is a site that ties into a lot of different aspects of the community. You can't build something of this scale without kind of considering its larger impact, which the board has realized when they've asked us to meet these goals by including the community, working with partners, seeing where we can potentially have mutual shared goals, shared resources, things like that. And so we're getting to what we call now conceptual design. I think one of the things that we heard from the board at the November 29th pre-agenda meeting was the concept of a feasibility study was not appetizing to some folks. And so I think it's probably better to think of this process as one element of conceptual design. And I think Kevin said it best when he said at the last meeting, it's not an optional part of the design. It's kind of you either do it before a referendum, before a vote, or you do it after a vote. The reason that staff is bringing this to you now is because it's staff's opinion that this is the most prudent time to do this kind of work. And it's also the most common time to do it. And so, it is very likely that for the city to build a recreation center on this scale, that we're going to need to go to the public for a vote, either the extension, most likely the extension of an existing sales tax that sunsets in 2026. And so if we, in a sense, save all of our conceptual design until after a potential vote, the city's kind of going to the public without much of a sense of what we're asking the public to vote on. And you may find this potentially in a smaller community. I've been hard-pressed to find any examples of communities about our size that would go to the vote without having a conceptual plan in place. And so this is kind of the most common practice. It costs less than 1% of overall project budget. What it does is going to establish and confirm the broad community needs related to this project. It's going to set our operations pro forma. We're going to be able to know by the end of this process what needs to go where and why. And then it's going to provide the public with a picture. And when I say picture, literal pictures, we're going to have architectural renderings, drawings. The public will have a really good sense of what they're voting on and what it's going to cost and how soon we can expect to recover our costs and how we're going to pay for it. And then also having this conceptual plan allows staff to potentially apply for grants. It's not saying we will 100% get grants, but without a conceptual plan, we really aren't able to apply for any grants. Any grantor would want to know, what are you proposing here, other than generally a rec center. So this is the reason that staff is proposing we do this kind of heavy lifting up front, again, because it's relatively inexpensive compared to overall cost. And this is the part of the process that ensures we're going to build something that the public, A, wants, the public can, B, afford, and that the city can sustainably operate for the foreseeable future. What this timeline could potentially look like, and again, we're very early on in the process, but one potential way this could play out over the course of a few years is this timeline I'm showing you here. So 2023, where we're in now, staff has been working on really developing the scope of the request for qualifications. And again, this is a state mandated procedure for us procuring professional services. So we, early on in the year, developed this request for qualifications, submitted it to architects. They have responded. We've interviewed our finalists. We've negotiated scope and fee. If the board approves this project, then we move into 2024, which is getting us conceptual design, also called feasibility study. If that goes well, then we move into 2025, ideally, being able to have a good sense of what we want to do. We would take it to the public to vote in 2025. If it doesn't pass the first time around, that gives us one more opportunity to potentially relook at it, reduce scope, take it back for a second vote in 2026 before this current existing sales tax expires. If it is approved in 2025, then we quickly move into design and construction. There are a lot of ifs in that intervening time that we need to work with bond attorneys on and understanding really when and how we can spend that money. So that's part of this funding plan development in 2024. Again, that's how the potential timeline might play out. But a lot of that is determined by what comes out of this year of community engagement, trying to figure out what the public would really support. Would you support that's one of the questions. Would you support the extension of a sales tax? Would you support a new tax? These are the sorts of things that you feel out during these studies. So I'm going to just hone in very briefly on 2024, give you a high-level look at what these elements in this conceptual plan consist of, and then the architects are going to come up and walk you through a case study of how that looks in real life. So we're calling it conceptual design and operations planning. So you've got market analysis, you've got an assessment and design of existing facilities, partner engagement, public design workshops, program and concept development, and business planning. So again, market analysis is trying to figure out the question, what can our community support? If we build it, will they come? Will we build something people want to come to? And then what sort of funding options is the community open to? Are they open to continuing a sales tax? Another potential option is to look at our existing facilities. Again, this rec center is inextricably tied to the operation of all of our other recreational programming and recreational facilities. So one question that could come out of this is, do we need to build a new pool out there? Can our existing pool, with a little bit of work, make it another 20 years? These are the sorts of questions that come in this existing facilities assessment. How can we build the broadest possible support? Let's say at a new rec center, there's a very large contingency that really wants a new soccer complex. We may find, you can't fit that soccer over there, but potentially if we can, say, get restrooms at the existing soccer fields, that may encourage some people who would otherwise not be wanting to go to a rec center. Well, I'll vote for it because at least we're getting something related to soccer. So throughout this process, we look broadly at what are the recreational needs of the community, how can we support those needs, build the broadest support possible for going to a vote, because I think, as everybody knows, at a city of our size, a lot of these votes are decided by just a handful of folks. And then another big question that came out of the comprehensive plan, how do we set up our existing facilities for long-term success? A lot of our facilities are reaching 30 years old. Our Family Aquatic Center was built in 96, which is about 30 years ago. Hasn't had any major upgrades in 30 years. It was built for a community that's half the size of our current community. We're finding that visits are down this year. Again, this is totally anecdotal, but it does seem like a lot of folks are going to newer facilities in smaller communities close by, Gentry, Gravett. We have the Lazy Boy ball fields, which have been brought up in the comprehensive plan and the goal setting. Again, more than 30 years old, in need of some love. We have Bob Henry Park, which is by far our most attended park. Again, it's been, I think, the 90s, the last time there was a playground renovation. And then we have the Sager Creek Soccer Complex, which is our most visited athletic complex, almost 50,000 visits in 2023. And we never had restrooms out there. We never had lights. So these are some things that we have to hold in tension as we look to something new, continue to remember we have other capital needs coming down the pipeline. How are we going to meet those large capital needs? We have partner engagement, asking the questions, can we partner with Siloam Springs School District? What sorts of needs do they have nearby? How does a city rec center affect John Brown's Walton Lifetime Health Complex and vice versa? What about private gym owners? How are they affected by building something like this? The Boys and Girls Club, one of the big things here is looking at, can we co-locate with the Boys and Girls Club? How can patients at the hospital potentially benefit? I understand that was one of the driving reasons this location was really considered, is because there's potential for a trail leading from the hospital, going around that recreation center for rehab patients and post-operations patients. So lots of coordination that needs to happen with community partners. We have public design workshops, and you'll see that more clearly in the architect's presentation. And then we have getting into the nitty-gritty, the program and concept development. And this is what goes where and how much space is it going to take up, and what's that space going to look like. This is what you think about when you think about an architect. These are the drawings, the exploded diagrams, the 3D renderings, the things like that. And then what I consider to be probably one of the most important elements is our business plan. Again, this is really shifting the center of gravity, both of our recreational activities, of the department as a whole. And so we need to be able to answer, what's it going to look like to operate this thing sustainably? How many staff are we going to need? What does annual maintenance look like? How do we budget for capital improvements? What should our hours of operation be if we want to recover our costs? These are all things that this architecture firm will be able to build for us in this contract through this process, so that when we go to the public, we can say with a high level of confidence, this will succeed, this is how it's going to be paid for, and this is how we operate it without it becoming a burden on the city. And so with those big picture concepts in mind, these are some of the priorities that we asked for architects to look at when they responded to our RFQ. Some of our assumptions are space at this site is limited, but recreation needs are broad. We may not be able to fit everything at one site. We have critical parks infrastructure that's aging, but our existing facilities have room for improvement. We have, as I mentioned, a 3/8 cents quality of life sales tax that's set to expire in 2026. And this particular time kind of presents potentially the best option in several years for having some sort of long-term funding for parks improvements of this scale. And then parks improvements funded through this bond issue are going to need to serve the broadest number of citizens possible if we hope it's going to be successful. So these are some of the things that we had in mind as we were crafting this request for qualifications. And as I mentioned, we had a lot of firms respond. It was unanimous amongst the staff that were reviewing responses that this team that is assembled here, SFS Architecture and WER Architects, were the most qualified. We feel very confident in their ability. They've, particularly SFS, has been focused on recreation construction and design almost exclusively in this region. You can see some of their recent work. And again, WER has a long reputation in Arkansas and Northwest Arkansas in particular. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to, yes, sir.
If I may, just got a couple questions before they come up. One of the things the board comments when we were having, right after a pre-agenda meeting, or during the pre-agenda meeting, were, can we do things in-house? You know, why can't we do things more in-house? With our staff, and the very next morning at what, 7:45, 8 o'clock, we were having a meeting. All right, what can we do to bring back to the board to cut cost? What can we do in-house? One of the issues that we have as a staff is the skill set. Planners aren't set up to do this type of planning. Ben or Kevin, if I'm saying that correctly, is what I've told you when I started this job. We have one engineer, and one only right now. It's really hard with all the projects that we have going out throughout the city to have his total focus 8 or 10 hours a day, 5 days a week for 365 days. I can't do it. So we went in there, and the initial cost was $228,240. So after we came back, all right, what can we do as a staff? What can we cut out? What can we do without? We're down to $178,000.
Yeah, so, and Brian will be able to show you those 3 options for scoping in his presentation.
And he'll also tell you there's another around $15,000 we can possibly cut. And he'll tell you what, if we cut it, this is what we would be losing, and that would be up to the board. I just want to be able to give you options. But again, with the skill set, it's just, this is something I really think that we need to get the concept drawings. I don't want to take the architect's thunder. He's forgot about more of that than I know. But again, if you would come up and just help us out with this, would be greatly appreciated. Is there any questions so far before they come up for Travis? Okay. Thanks, Travis.
When we did the library, a similar process?
I would imagine so, yeah. I wasn't involved in that process, but it's a somewhat standard, practice that you would follow. And again, the architects will be able to walk you through here just in a second what that'll look like.
Thank you.
So I'm going to introduce Brian Garvey with SFS Architects, and he'll walk you through his team and their structure.
Travis is a little bit taller than me there. Before I get started, I'm going to let John and Elizabeth from WER kind of introduce our team here.
Yeah. So John Langham, architect with the design team with WER.
And Elizabeth Stennett with WER.
Yep. So Elizabeth and I will be relatively brief, and then Brian's going to walk you through a case study to really take the proposal and see what that looks like on a past project that they've done. So our team structure, we're set up to where we're bringing local knowledge. Elizabeth actually born and raised in Siloam Springs, and we work here locally all the time in the local market, know the construction market, and then really fortunate to be able to bring to the city really a national content expert in SFS. Worked with member of their team for I serve on a board with a member of their team, and Ballard King, who nationally works on the pro formas and operations specifically for recreation centers, and then if we like the survey, ETC, who does that on a national basis. So. And
so having grown up here, I'm really excited about this. But I know that being Siloam, we want to make sure that it's operationally and financially stable. We want to make sure that, it's not taking resources away from the city, it's really adding. And I think our community engagement is going to be a really important part. And then just being here and listening to people and hearing what they need, what they want, and how we can make it work for all the different groups.
Absolutely, yeah. And then Brian's going to walk through the proposal with a case study. Thank you. All right, thanks.
All right. Good afternoon. Again, my name's Brian Garvey. I'm with SFS Architecture. We're located out of Kansas City, Missouri. We have some strong connections down here in Northwest Arkansas and in the state of Arkansas. one of which with WER Architects, as John mentioned. The thing I want to say to start off with is this type of work, you call it a feasibility study, call it concept design, call it business plan, call it due diligence. There's a lot of different ways or a lot of different terms that you can call what you all are about to embark on with this project. And it's not a single scope of work. It's very comprehensive, and it is a niche and a specialty and requires some specialty consultants. So that's why we put this team together. We felt that it was comprehensive, that it addressed all the needs and gave you the most informed information to take to the community, and that the community would be involved in that process and develop an ownership in that process as well. So all of these keys to success that are up here I think are important. The three that I highlight, to Travis's point earlier, operationally and financially sustainable is key. A community-driven process is key. Listening to your citizens, listening to your community. What do they want? What do they need? How are you going to build it, fund it, and operate it? Also very key. And that leads to actionable and creative solutions. So the case study that I selected for this, and this was one of many projects that we included in the response to the RFQ, was from Excelsior Springs, Missouri. This is a small community. It's on the outskirts of Kansas City, about 45 minutes northeast of the metropolitan area of Kansas City proper. It's a population of about 10,500, but it serves a much bigger regional area, a rural area out there. Liberty, Missouri is the closest larger city to Excelsior Springs. But like I mentioned, it has, I think they have members in like 13 or 14 zip codes right now around their area. 6,000 members in their community center that they've built a few years ago. But this little community, they have some great historic assets. They've got a great history. They actually have a spring in town called the Siloam Spring. I thought that was an interesting parallel as well. But these two facilities that you see on the screen are kind of their keystone projects in town. The Elms Hotel from the early 1900s and the Hall of Waters, which was a WPA project with some really unique architectural features, founded on several of the springs right there in downtown Excelsior. So similar to Siloam Springs, they've been talking about a recreation center for a long time. And this case study, it's about 10 years old from the first time that we started engaging with Excelsior Springs. And the reason I chose it is because that's been an ongoing relationship built on the foundation that study produced. So in 2013, they did issue an RFQ. We were selected for that late in the summer of 2013. The scope of work, I'm not going to go through all those bullet points that are on there on the far left-hand side of the screen, but it's almost the same scope of work that Siloam Springs was looking at here. The one difference is their park system wasn't as developed as yours currently is. They didn't have the assets in their park system. Things had left their system over time. They had some beautiful natural space throughout their city. They had the Hall of Waters, which had become their city hall. They had the Elms, which had become, through different ownership over the years, 4 or 5 different owners, had burned a few times, so on and so forth. So we didn't have the assessment component in that business plan and feasibility study. That's the one difference that I wanted to point out. But they, similar to you, recognize the importance of an operations plan. That designing and building a facility really is the easy part. You know, you spend 10, 15, 30, 40, however many millions of dollars on one facility or a combination of multiple facilities. That's easy money. The hard part's actually operating it and maintaining it. And that cost over time will never go down. It always increases. It may have dips as it goes, but the cost to maintain and operate these types of facilities is extensive. In 2014, we concluded that study. I'll go through the parts and pieces of that. That concluded in late January of 2014. And in April of 2014, there was a referendum. It was a sales tax referendum to fund that community center. And that did pass overwhelmingly. We went in directly to design and completed design in about 8 months following that referendum, picking up from our feasibility study and concept plan and business plan, and started construction and opened that facility in 2016. So that 3 years there almost that it took to go from the point we started to the point they had a facility that they were operating. Based on that foundation, they were able to realize phase 2 within 5 years. So I'm going to go through this process now of what we did in 2013 to 2014 and how we kind of arrived there. So the first piece, and I'll point out in the upper right-hand side of the screen there, it says Task 1B, and you'll see that throughout these slides. So we try to relate what we did in Excelsior Springs to how these tasks are broken down in the Siloam Springs proposal. So Task 1B, it's one of the first things that we start doing as part of gathering information and getting a background on the area, and that's performing a market analysis. So Ballard King and Associates, who John had mentioned, they are headquartered out of Denver, Colorado, owned by Jeff King and Ken Ballard. And Ken Ballard's a Northwest Arkansas native. He does a lot of work down here still. He worked on Bentonville's Community Center about 10, 12 years ago. He's worked on several feasibility studies, concept plans, master plans, comprehensive plans in the area as well. But their market analysis, that's going to look at a lot of different things. So what is the service area? What's the primary service area? That could be either a drive time of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, so on and so forth, you know, from the city center or the site location, or it could be 5, 10 miles, whatever it may be. Here in Excelsior, you can see when you got out about 10 miles, you were starting to get into, you know, the outskirts, Liberty, Missouri, some of those bigger population centers, but you also have these really sparse rural areas as well. What we look at with the market analysis is participation statistics and the capacity of the folks in that area and the different demographics to participate in certain types of sports. So that may be there's a ton of basketball going on there, there's a ton of biking going on there, there's very little of this, there's very little of that. What that helps us see before we start space programming are the types of spaces that have the potential to generate a higher amount of revenue and support a better cost recovery versus spaces that generate less revenue and don't support that cost recovery. And it doesn't mean that we just start picking the things off the top of the list to include or take to the community and say, do you want these? It's that we have an understanding of what the right balance is as we're designing that facility and programming that facility. So really important to start with that foundation. Community engagement, all of these projects, when they're municipal projects, of course, it's really important to understand what the community wants, to listen to them, to engage with them, to educate them, and help them understand the types of things that they could have in this facility, what's reasonable, what's realistic, what does the private sector have, or what can the private sector provide that the city doesn't need to be in the business of providing. So that looks like a couple of different things. That's community meetings. In this case, we have 3 of those meetings planned for Siloam Springs. Very similar in Excelsior Springs, we had the same number of meetings there. But it's also surveying and online engagement. And back 10 years ago, the way we did that, we used a site called Mind Mixer. These days, we might use Mind Mixer, we might use My Sidewalk, Social Pinpoint. There's a number of different types of online social engagement platforms that you can use, and Facebook and X, I guess, are also options. But we'd work with the city staff to understand what might integrate well with the city's website already, what have they used, what has there been some familiarity with, and utilize that. But that online platform lets people engage on their schedule and on their time and when they're most comfortable, and maybe go back to their family and say, hey, let's sit down and look at the information and let's provide some feedback to the city on this project. So we typically would launch that type of platform and an initial open informal survey at the first community meeting. That community meeting is really an informational meeting. It's outlining what our schedule and our scope is. When do you have opportunities to come back to the next meeting and the third meeting, and what are we going to look at those? What are we going to be talking about? But also some really broad input of this is the whole range, or this is the spectrum of activities and amenities that these types of facilities might have. Give them 3 dots and say, put a dot on your highest priority space for your family or for your group that you represent, or for you as an individual. And that's one type of activity or exercise that we do at a early community meeting. Comment cards, the simple comment cards that you just write your thoughts on. Maybe you rank a series of spaces on that comment card. Maybe you take it back to your family, or you take it back to your work or whatever, and you can send those into the city. And the online engagement. So again, it's all those different ways to provide input and provide feedback. And that's the first community engagement session. So from there, hopefully we've formed an advisory committee or a steering committee or something along those lines too, and we have some good participation there. In Excelsior Springs, we actually had someone from the private fitness industry that owned a gym in town And they brought that concern to that committee. They said, if the city's talking about opening a fitness center, how am I going to compete with a subsidized municipal facility? I'm concerned about that. So I want to be on the steering committee. And we said, come aboard. We had a real estate agent who was really interested in what this facility could provide as far as economic impact in the area. And that was a great addition. We had staff. We had someone from Public Works. We had really a good eight-person steering committee on this project. So after our first community meeting, we sat down with that group and we went through a programming exercise, meaning what types of spaces and how big is this facility going to be. I'll tell you, the first round of that was like a 120,000 square foot facility that in 2013 cost $75 million, I think, or something like that. And everyone said, well, that's nice. How are we going to ever achieve that? So then we work into right-sizing it and understanding priorities and using that community engagement and using the steering committee to help sort through those priorities. So this space plan that's on the screen here, this represents the four main categories or four priorities for Excelsior Springs. The administration and support, which of course we need that for any building, but recreation and fitness, community gathering space and classroom space, and indoor aquatics. Outdoor aquatics was the fifth priority, but it just wasn't going to be realistic in their budget, even though they didn't have any municipal pool at that point in time in their community. So we arrived at about a 50,000 square foot facility. By this point, their finance staff had said, you know, if we go out for a 3/8 cent sales tax, we're going to produce about an $18.5 million bond capacity there to fund this project. So things were starting to come into some form of alignment at that point. We went out to the community on the second community meeting, and we went with site plans at this point. And again, it's bringing the community along through this process, starting to develop that concept, but giving them input all along the way and being transparent with how we've arrived at these decisions. The site for this project was on the west side of town. It was about 2 or 3 miles outside of the city center of Excelsior Springs. And it was on property that the school district said, if you want to build a new community center, we've got all this empty space on the south side of our campus property. We would give you that land for this project. But we want to talk about maybe some operational partnerships or some programming partnerships. And we'd like to have someone from our school board on your management board for the community center if we do all of that. So we facilitated those partnership discussions along with the YMCA, who was a potential operator for this facility, to see if that was the right fit. We had a lot of these little, focus group and partnership discussions along the way. But community meeting number 2, we came back with 4 site plans. The one that's on the right there, that's kind of where we landed. And you can see outdoor aquatics was still there. We still planned for that. It was a high priority. It just wasn't realistic at the time. How it connected to the school, how things were going to work logistically with parking and circulation, all of that was brought out into the public forum and allowed them the ability to comment on that and provide their thoughts, their concerns, their ideas, all of those different things. We also got some great feedback on the design aesthetic that started at this point in the process, really early on, but people were like, hey, I really hope that even though this isn't downtown, that you consider some of our history, and bring some of the unique motifs from the Hall of Waters into this project, which was a really fascinating little building. But also the high school. How do we blend in with the campus but not look like we're a school building? How does it have its own civic identity? So how do we pull material cues but maybe turn that a little bit so that it felt more like a municipal recreation center? So again, all part of the public input process and what shaped this project. These were some of the final images. So the program, everything dialed in. It stayed right there. It hovered around that 50,000 square foot mark, and that's where we landed at the end of this process. A couple of quick graphics. These were in process that came back out to the community meeting. Helped to show them how spaces were arranged, how we leveraged the topography of that site in the building design. So we ended up with a 2-story building with 6 levels, and everything was interconnected by 1 ramp, which was a really interesting opportunity to take advantage of. What did the indoor pool look like, or what could it look like? So it's all showing them what this money is going towards. Now bringing it all back to reality, what's it cost to operate something like this? All along the way, our partner from Ballard King didn't just stop at the market analysis and then wait for us to design a building and said, okay, that costs this much to operate. we had them involved in all of these programming discussions as well, to say, you know, if your fitness area was programmed at 8,000 feet, you really don't need to have 8,000 square feet. You can have a 5,500 square foot fitness facility, and you can cut one staff person out of that. Or you can change the shape of your pool slightly, and you can cut one lifeguard out of that. So those operational realities are overlaid with design, and it's really important. Like I mentioned, that cost just keeps going up. Building it and designing it really is the easy part. In Excelsior Springs, they didn't have a lot of capacity to subsidize a facility like this. So they set a goal of 100% cost recovery. They said this needs to fund itself through user fees, through partner programming, whatever it may be. And Ballard King got it to a 98% cost recovery in that first year. So we called that the base. But then by year 3, as some other things came online, they were hitting that 100%, 101%, 102% as it moved on. This included a $50,000 a year maintenance fund. So as they needed to do work on the pool, as they needed to replace something, they were always planning to have $50,000 set aside for that work that would keep accruing over time. They've exceeded that. You know, Ballard King does a great job at putting these plans together. They're conservative. They wouldn't be in business for 40 years if they did bad business plans for municipalities all over the country. So Excelsior Springs has exceeded that operations projection. So at the end of that study, you know, like I said, that was the end of January, at about 3 months, 2.5 months or so before the referendum was going to go to a vote in the public. But we had a 50,000 square foot facility. It was $15.3 million construction cost, it was estimated. We came in at the end of that project about 2% in change orders, and most of that was for an AV system that they were able to add. But the deliverables were an operations plan, the community engagement process, distilled down into what came out of those meetings, all the documentation from that, the program, the space program, and the concept design. The reality of that project, I'll go through some of the finished images of that really quickly, is on the screen here. This was an award-winning project. This is one of those that, you know, it won design awards, but to us, some of the more important awards were what were called capstone awards or community impact awards, things like that. This has really changed Excelsior Springs. This drove development around that site at a pace that they didn't anticipate. The real estate agents have all said, like, once that community center became a reality, everybody wanted to live here. So that was great. There's great feedback like that. And I think economic development, indirect and indirect, is something that municipal recreation facilities really do a great job of providing. Again, some of those design threads I mentioned earlier about the topography and how the ramp was going to work with this facility. And then the constant reminder of health and wellness. We used a lot of imagery, used a lot of vibrant colors. We highlighted the systems of the building, similar to like the systems of the body. Some interesting things like that. All that came from that community input process. And everyone is just thrilled to be a part of this, this project. I still go up there. I was just up there a few weeks ago and helped them inflate their air-supported dome over their new outdoor pool. And you still have people that are just, you know, thank you so much for being a part of our community and part of this process. That's why I love focusing on parks and recreation and community recreation projects, is being able to deliver on things like this. So I hope that helps clarify why we put this scope of work together for Siloam Springs and the rec center, but also these other existing park amenities. As I mentioned, the one piece that wasn't in the Excelsior Springs scope was the facility conditions assessments. We work on master plans and comprehensive plans and strategic plans for a lot of different size communities. Some examples of what what those deliverables look like are on the screen here. We typically look at universal accessibility. Are the facilities accessible not just internally, but from neighborhoods? What are the street conditions like? Is it pedestrian friendly, bike friendly, vehicle friendly? Is it safe and secure? But what are the conditions of the envelope? What are the conditions of the building systems? What are the conditions of the windows, doors? All of those different things. And that gets put into a very simple, easy to read deliverable to understand what's working well in those facilities and what needs improvement. And what comes along with that is concept plans in some cases. So for the pool, are there ways to modify that pool to make it more multi-generational, more family friendly, whatever it may be. It's just an example. Bringing it all back from these other examples or case studies to Siloam Springs. I think you've all seen the schedule. It was part of our proposal. If you haven't, real quick, you can start to see how things lay out. Again, facility assessments, existing data, market analysis, those are all the foundational components that start this process. We don't start the community engagement process until we have that, because we also like to show the community, these are the conditions of your existing amenities. What ideas do you have, or what are the needs with those that you aren't having met right now? Staff and partner interviews. Stakeholder gets used a lot in these types of discussions. Stakeholders, that's really broad. I mean, that's everybody that could ever use this facility, right? So it's not just staff, advisory board, school district, John Brown University. I mean, it's the community. These are groups that we want to spend some time just talking to in particular. So, did you have something, Alan? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, great job. Thank you. Just
Yeah.
a few things that you may help me explain. Looking into this study, you know, this is something that's goal in 2022 as we move forward. It becomes my project moving forward. But I think Travis said earlier, this study will help us qualify for grants. Without a study, without engineering plans, it's just like East Main and other projects we're doing. A lot of grants aren't going to even look at you unless you have concept drawings or architecture drawings. One of the questions I have, and I think you've answered it, is a part of this study, we get concept drawings. You'll know what the Park and Rec Center is going to look like. You're going to know what we're going to have in there. Will this study help us in the final architectural drawings as we go forward? Because if we just say, hey, we're not going to do a study, we're going to do it inside, let's do architecture. It's what I've seen and found. I think it would cost us even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think we sent, Allison from our office had forwarded over what the deliverable package looked like for that feasibility study, which plus the appendix, which included all those meeting notes, it would quadruple the thickness of this. But this is an example of that feasibility study and business plan deliverable. This is where we picked up right after the referendum, the schematic design report. This happened in 3.5 weeks. Without this was a months-long process to get to this point. So schematic design concluded. That's really confirming costs. That's starting to develop construction documents for that process. And then design development phase, construction documents phase, that all wrapped up 6 months after that. Like I say, typically you're starting from scratch. You're talking about a year-long process. So there's a ton of work and due diligence and detail that goes into this. I call it pre-referendum, pre-vote, pre-ballot initiative, whatever you like to call it, due diligence. There's a ton of detail that goes into that just isn't possible in a typical design process. So.
And one of the other things, board too, and like Travis said, we've had many meetings since our November 29th meeting. This is less than 1% of possible overall construction cost. But to be honest, I don't know what the construction costs are going to be.
I was going to say that too, yeah.
Help us. Is it going to be 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, 40?
Yeah.
I don't know. But as we get the scope, we can shrink it.
Yeah.
Like you were talking, went from a $75 million project and kept shrinking, and
yeah.
the square footage to get what we need. I've talked to the school, and nothing concrete, but they're interested in talking about partnerships, because if they have something, why do we build something for right across the street? We can partner. Same vice versa for them. It's something, if we had a basketball court, they would allow them to do tournaments because they would have 2 gyms.
Yeah.
But again, it helps our citizens look of what their needs are. What are the needs of the Park and Rec Center? So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Just I would like to see what the overall construction costs. I'm not sure I can get that without this.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, Excelsior Springs was one where the school was really only thinking about giving the land for it and being able to have some gym time, some program time available in the facility. And it's turned into multiple schools being able to use this outdoor pool, and the school district contributed to the air-supported dome to be able to use it through the wintertime now. So those partnerships evolve and they develop, and sometimes it's just a seed crystal that has to be planted to get into those discussions.
The study, and things are running through my head, my previous job, we built a police athletic league, and one of the we had a gym, we had an indoor batting cage. It was constantly packed, but one of the number one things that we had every day, we had a learning center. Is that something that we need, where our kids have somewhere to go, and we have laptops and computers somewhere they can study because they don't have that at home? That's something community can tell us if that's a need.
Yeah.
That's just something that I know that in our center was very utilized. And a lot of times with the kids, they weren't allowed, they had to do an hour of learning center before they were allowed to go to the gym.
Mm-hmm. You know, on your comment about the construction cost and how to develop that, I would not recommend just running out and saying, what do we need and what do we want? It's looking at scenarios here internally to say, I think you're talking about a 3/8 inch or 3/8 cent sales tax continuation, which is, you know, a new tax that's going to start up again. But what's the amount of revenue that can produce, and then how do we start to allocate that across not just a new facility, but maintaining existing facilities as well, which is why the assessment of the others is as important as anything in this, I think, is how to spend the money wisely.
And I'm sorry, board, there was thoughts around my head. I didn't mean to take anything, open it up for your questions.
Well, and I did have a question related to, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your comment about, it sounds like what you were saying and what you were agreeing with is a study like this sort of puts us that much further ahead when it comes to design.
Yeah.
And that we're going to pay for this one way or the other, just later over a longer period of time. Did I hear that?
Yeah, and I think it delays your potential opening
firm to do all that, they're going to do it, but it's just going to probably take a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's a great question, Director. Again, I look at things as I study this and really wrap my head around it, meeting with staff. I was, impressed when the firm comes up. I have 3 people. It's kind of like our law firm. I don't just have one lawyer. I have 3. I have 3 architects. If I take all Megan's and Ben and Kevin and Chris's time and I focus on this, I'm taking those 4 salaries for the whole year, and they're focusing on this project when they really don't have the time.
And I think that was one of the things that I had mentioned as a concern before. And I just want to say I don't have a lot more comments to make, surprisingly, other than I appreciate the staff and you all working together to figure this out. But the staff being willing to kind of take another look at it to see what things they may be able to do, but also realizing some of the limitations that we as staff have, not just skill sets, but just time-wise. So I appreciate your working to sort of make this maybe a little bit more palatable for all of us.
I'm sorry, before I go there, and earlier when I say skill set, I'm not demeaning our employees at all.
No, I understand. It's a certain skill set.
But in Park and Rec, his staff, when you only have, what do you have, 10?
We got 10 maintenance. We have 1.5 program staff.
And in their focus most of the year is getting things ready and Christmas parade and cutting lawn and different things like that. Travis is my guy over there that has the most experience in this area, which I have him doing tons of things too. So I didn't mean anything to come across.
Something would have to give. Yeah, no, I completely understand. I mean, we all have different skill sets, and there are certain skill sets that you have to have right now, and there are certain skill sets this would take, and so I completely understand that. But I also understand that you all are pretty much at max as it is. So what gives?
And 2 comments that I would just add. One. Again, I want to reiterate, this is not a process that's separate from architectural design. This is the architectural design. These are the architects. This is just one phase of that architectural design process. So it's not like it's a separate, standalone, optional phase. These are the architects. This is how they get us to those final schematics. And then we have, again, this is just a pre-agenda meeting, so we're not looking for any sort of votes. But we do want to show y'all 3 different options for scope. Now that you've seen what the scope could include, ways we could potentially scale it back, and you may have a better sense of, if we scale it back, what you'd be giving up, what you might be, accepting. So on the left-hand column there is the full scope that we presented in the first pre-agenda meeting. The middle column is if we take out all existing facilities assessments with the exception of the Family Aquatic Center. That one is left in there in this particular iteration of scope, only because it's the most complicated and the one that requires the most money to run. It's also one of the older facilities and requires the most real thoughtful niche design and what that could potentially look like. It's where we could probably also realize the most cost savings. It's where we need potential upgrades the most. So if you were to take out all other existing facilities assessment, just looking at the aquatic center, how that might tie into the rec center, that cost is there. And then the final column on the right is if we take out all existing facility assessments, we only look at this one property, and we don't do any statistically valid surveys at all. That gets you down to 162.7. And again, there in the original proposal, there are two sort of survey methods that the firm would be using to try to gather data. And it's very broad, but if you're looking at specifically surveys, there's the kind of like the online survey, which we've all seen, where anybody can comment, and they're really helpful for gauging who's the most interested, where passions lie. You get a lot of, you tend to get a lot of feedback in these. Maybe 1,000 people respond. The downside to this is you get, the sorts of people that respond to online surveys are only a small subset of the population, and you have the opportunity for, say, the loudest voices in the room to drive this project in a way that's not representative of the community. With the statistically valid survey, which is, it's more work, it takes more specialization, you're going to be getting a truly representative sample of the community, not based on who's really got the biggest bull or dog in the fight. You're going to be capturing those people that don't really respond to surveys, that maybe don't even care about a rec center. You're going to be capturing that data there. And so in a sense, they're both really helpful. They're different kinds of information gathering, and they serve two different purposes, but help give you a more complete picture. But again, the statistically valid survey is expensive. It's a little over $15,000. Something we can take out. It's one piece of the puzzle, and hopefully you understand. If we take it out, these are the sort of the give and takes of these sorts of things. So these are the three scoping options that we've kind of gone back and want to present to y'all, and see if you have any initial feedback on which of these three potential scopes sounds appealing to you, or if you have feedback on these three scopes and questions about them.
We'll be happy to give you copies of this. I know you can't make a decision, or we're not voting on anything today. We just want you something that hopefully in the next couple of weeks you can give us some feedback to, we're looking at 228 was our initial. We can cut that back to 181, or if we cut some other things out, we can cut it back to 162. We just want to know what we would be losing, what we'd be gaining, things that we can do. So again, I due to time, I want to give you an opportunity. If you have questions, they're available, and fire away.
Madam Mayor? Yes. I have a question of Brian.
Yes, sir.
Two questions. First one, in Missouri, how many acres did you utilize in that facility?
Excelsior Springs was around 8.5 acres
8.5, okay.
Before the outdoor aquatics. We added another 2 acres from the school for the outdoor aquatics, I believe. Okay. Yeah.
So with 29 acres available, we should be good.
You've got space, yeah.
Okay.
Now, there was a lot of shared parking with the high school there that's not included in that, so, it's a different situation. But 29 acres is adequate, yeah.
Okay. Next question is, we can do our own community involvement and hear from the people. But I'd like to know where you would step in as far as taking us to 2040. And the reason I ask that is, what we do today, the kiddos that are 8 and 10 and 12, they won't be giving us any feedback. But in 20 years,
Yeah.
They're going to be in the thick of it. We have people moving in at a rate to where we're scheduled or slated, or however the word might be, to almost double in size by 2040. And in that scope, we have people who are coming from other parts of the country, from several areas around the world. And how do you put that into your package so that when you take your gun and you're shooting 20 years down the road, that you can make your best shot?
Yeah, so I think the easiest, lowest hanging fruit there to plan for is planning for expand the initial build out of this facility. Always plan for space that a third court could be added. Aquatics gets a lot trickier when you're talking indoor aquatics. It's a lot harder to add on indoor aquatics to indoor aquatics. So again, prioritizing and planning. Is indoor aquatics a higher priority than outdoor? You already have outdoor aquatics. So what can we do with that? And where's areas that can expand, or how can it grow over time, or how can it be easily modified or refreshed over time? One good example with aquatics is piping in some things, but not necessarily building out the features that come out of the ground, so that you can refresh it in 5 or 10 years, or you can change some things out to refresh the facility. Adding slide flumes, things like that. Those are easy aquatics kind of things. When it comes to community spaces, classroom spaces, another thing we try to do is build for a lot of multi-purpose flexibility. So we try to think of 3 ways to use every space instead of just one. Don't have, a community meeting room and a community classroom and another room over here that all kind of function the same, or they all have the same kind of thing in them. So try to design them with 3 different uses in mind at least. I think that's important. Technology, 15 years ago, we tried to think about technology and how it was going to evolve. Did we see it going wireless so quickly? I think that was the big thing. We put a lot of infrastructure in 15 years ago that isn't even being used at this point. So looking at technology, how it's going to evolve, the types of activities that people are doing and how those are going to evolve. Esports is one that still is really interesting. The fact that this is a market that has caught fire of kids watching other kids play video games. Who'd have thought? But it's also important. It's all part of the idea of inclusive recreation and inclusive design. It's not what we thought it was 20 years ago. So what's it going to be in another 20 years? We really have to think hard about that now. We really have to get a lot of different opinions and a lot of different perspectives to even have a shot at being thinking about 2040 right now. So where we come in on a community engagement process, I think that was your other question. Yes, the city can have their own community meetings, ask questions and all of that. How we fit into that and what expertise we bring to that is bringing the different types of activity areas and what's worked in similar types of communities. What are things that aren't even being looked at in the Midwest right now, in Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, these areas? What are the things they're doing on the coast, or what are the things they're doing up north, or what are the things they're doing out south that make sense here? Ice ribbons have caught a lot of attention lately, but I question whether or not that's the right thing to do in this part of the world. So those are the types of things I think we bring to community engagement, is how do we bring different activities from across the country and say, what do you all think of this? Do you think this is something that's gonna take hold? Pickleball is another great example.
Yeah, wow. I never even heard of it until just a couple years ago.
Yeah. You can't go 10 blocks in Kansas City without hitting a pickleball court right now. So.
When you work with small communities that have do you work with those that have a boys and girls community building?
We have in the past, yes.
Do they work together, or are they separate?
Well, maybe I'm not thinking of the same thing you're talking about here. Clarify what you're
We have a boys and girls club.
Sure.
That has a facility.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking of is there a way to integrate that so that we are taking that facility and maybe combining with what we're wanting to do in the future?
Yeah, if they're going to be a part of this facility, I think it's just meeting with them and finding out how that can work operationally. What times do they need it? Is it full time? Is it, Monday through Friday from a certain time of day? Is it on a weekend? What does that look like? So to answer your question, I need to visit with them we need to talk through that and how that
Do
does
you-
integrate and how that
When
works.
these communities that you've worked with, have they had boys and girls?
Not in their community centers, I'll say that. There may have been programming in the community center, but not a dedicated space in the facilities we've worked on, yeah. Ballard King, our other partner consulting firm on this project, they're coast to coast, top to bottom in the U.S. They probably would bring some examples of how that's worked in other facilities. Yep.
Thank you.
So I do have a question about the community engagement. So you're taking that out of what the firm would do. Travis, you're recommending. Well,
Yeah.
I guess what is.
No, the things that are coming out of community engagement, there's the statistically valid survey.
Okay, so the 44,000 that would be coming out of that would be.
No, that 44,000 is representative
would
of
be
the,
what
so
it
there's,
would
there's 15,000 coming out
Okay.
that represents the cost of a statistically valid survey. So again, there's all kinds of community engagement going on. The difference between 60,000 and 44,000 is not doing a statistically valid survey.
Okay.
So that's the one element of the community engagement that's pulled out in that lowest cost number.
Well, and for the reasons that you mentioned, is it, if you're not going to do a statistically valid survey, is it beneficial to do a survey at all?
Yes,
You
I think
still do a
surveys
survey?
are critical.
Okay.
What we have included in community engagement still is an open and informal survey, so it could be SurveyMonkey or Social
Okay,
Pinpoint or
okay.
what have you. The statistically valid survay that ETC does, and I think Siloam Springs has done a recent
right, mhm.
citizen satisfaction survey with them. It's called statistically valid. Do you understand the idea of different? Okay, I won't go through that then. Yep. But yeah, you were asking the question, and I apologize if I misunderstood, because you were interpreting this as $44,000 coming out.
I was
Yeah.
interpreting it, yeah, that was
Yeah.
a $44,000 savings, but what you're
No, we're not.
saying is it's
Yeah.
$15,000 savings. Okay.
Yeah, we haven't proposed taking us out of the community engagement process. I
good.
still think it's
When
really
we were
important for
trying-
us to participate.
Director Hunt, when we were trying to figure out where we could cut cost, it started out 60,000. We cut it to 44 because
I just read it wrong. Read it wrong.
But
Yeah.
again, we're still getting everything we need to do it. It's just something that we could possibly do in-house and statistical wise. And that's also with the assessments of the existing facilities. I thought, we could look at that maybe at a later time. I wanted more of the focus to be on the actual Park and Rec Center.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other questions, board? At all? Hey, thank you very much. Very
Thank you all.
informative. Thank you. And to wrap up, I'll be sending you an email. I'm gonna have Ms. Hallie come up. She's our grant writer, Hallie Munson, and she's just gonna go over just a few little things real quick with you about the RAISE grant and where we are in that process.
Thank you, Alan. Hi, Hallie Monson, Grant Coordinator. Thanks for hearing me out really quick. Just wanted to touch base with you guys that we are...
Your mic.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is that better? Sorry about that. We are going full steam ahead for this RAISE grant. And so we're at the point now where I'm looking for letters of support. And these are very helpful. We have been in touch with a lot of different members of the community, local politicians, but we also wanted to reach out to you guys, just asking for short letters expressing support for our project. You'll receive an email tomorrow with a lot of the specifics and instructions. Essentially, the specifics that I just wanted to touch base with you guys about now is part of this project is the Sager Creek Bridge, and we'll be asking for the design plans to come out of the grant funding, and we'll also be using the plans that came from the Design Excellence Grant for the East Main Street portion of this project. So the specifics of exactly what are included in that we have listed in the email that you guys will receive tomorrow. So I just wanted to let you know that that was coming out, and you absolutely do not have to write a letter of support. It is not required. It is just very helpful to show the funders that we have the support of our board of directors, and I know it's a busy time, so I would really appreciate any support that you guys would be willing to give us. Is there any questions I can answer?
Thank you, Hallie. And tomorrow
Thank
you'll
you.
see a letter. She sent it to me, wanted to proof it, but I want to give her an opportunity to come talk to you, how important it is to get the letters. It's not required, it just helps the process. I also want to meet with Hallie and Kevin and staff to make sure the board understands that I want the bridge to be a part of this process. You know, the issues that we're having with the bridge and the weight and different things like that, I think that's, we also need to include that. So we're going, you know, moving forward with that. So you will be getting an email, and it'll have a kind of self-explanatory and kind of tell you what the process is. But like, staff's always available for questions or concerns. Please let us know. Is there anything from staff, anything you want to weigh in, Kevin? Anything we've missed over this process?
I don't believe so. I think that pretty much covers it. So one of the things that Hallie picked up on just reviewing similar cities and other RAISE grants that were put together is that a lot of the ones that were awarded had letters of support from local mayors, local politicians, larger industries that were benefiting from the project. So that's where this is coming from, is that's something that we've seen consistent through other communities that have successfully gotten RAISE grants in the past.
Is there anything else from staff? Board, before the meeting, we put a little token of our appreciation. That's from staff. We probably don't tell you enough. We do appreciate your time and what you do and our support, just the budget, the raises, the tools you give us to do our job. And this is just a small token as us, you know, the card just saying thank you from the staff. So just please know you are appreciated, even if you're not told enough. So I hope, you know, we will meet again. A reminder again, we'll be at the library, probably the last time that we get together as a group before the Christmas holidays. And if I don't get the chance to tell you, you know, I do appreciate you and God bless you. And I hope everybody has a safe and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. But we'll talk a little bit about that on the 19th. With that, Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. So just one more time, I'll just double check and make sure, directors, any more questions or comments?
I would like to say that you are telling us how much the staff supports us and appreciates us. I would also like to say that we appreciate the staff and all that you do to help us do our job. Thank you very much.
All right, well, with that, Travis, thank you for your presentation today. Brian, John, and Elizabeth, thank you for being here and helping us understand a little bit about what you're proposing and how it will benefit our community. I think that's the main focus of all of this, is we want to make sure we benefit our community. So, with nothing else, I will adjourn this pre-agenda meeting. Everyone have a good evening.